And I would invite Joe and Patty up to the chairs up here if you want to be a part of the conversation. So we've got a workshop on facilities this evening, and obviously it can go anywhere the board wants it to go, but there are 4 areas that I identified as helpful in kind of putting together some goals, a process, and a timeline to help with our efforts in the school district. The first is naming of buildings. We're going to build a new building, so that's something to consider. The second is school boundaries and finalizing what that looks like when we open new buildings. The third is school property reuse, so reuse of our facilities that we are vacating. And the fourth would be kind of more general long-range facility planning. I handed out some documents that can be helpful, the long-range facility plan, and then some policies that are administrative policies. Those include 5120, attendance boundary modification guidelines, 7100, facilities development, 7250, naming facilities, and 7300, disposition, disposal of school property. If it's all right with the board, I'd start with naming of buildings.
Can I bring up a related one?
Please.
I'm sure that this is already on your and Nick's mind, but do we have a good plan to document the buildings that we're taking down as we make the transition over the next couple of years? I think having that local history, having as many images, as much of that as we can for the archive, right, will be really interesting. And then there are maybe opportunities to bring some of that history into the new building or future new buildings or things. So.
Yes, we have already done walkthroughs of our current buildings to identify kind of key historical artifacts and elements. And we have identified spots in the buildings for their collection in perpetuity. So we are definitely thinking about that. We always work with the Historical Society as well. They have limitations on space as we do, and so being thoughtful about some of those things, but definitely trying to memorialize what we can.
Great, thank you.
Naming of buildings, and so I'm curious just first, with goals, with the process, 2 things that I thought about as goals in the naming process, where it should feel fair, and ideally it would bring our community together. Those are 2 things that I thought about. Should feel fair, and it should bring our community together. Curious if there's other goals or principles that you would want to apply to that process, or if you reject those out of hand.
I guess I'm just reflecting on how we did the naming of the Northside School, and it looks like, I don't know if Scott's still on, but naming it Northside doesn't necessarily bring the city to, I think it was an appropriate name, and I'm glad we named it that, but bringing the community together, I'm not sure that was a goal. And it was still appropriately named, so I guess that's what I'm just struggling with.
And maybe I'm thinking more our school communities or our neighborhoods, or just trying to bring unity as opposed to division. Or maybe not creating division is better than bringing our community together.
Yeah, I've had outreach of people talking about State Road and obviously renaming it, because you're bringing 2 schools together, and so that you can feel as one instead of the Hinchin kids coming into State Road and saying you're a State Road kid now. And that would be my recommendation, is to obviously rename that school. But
I would.
I like that idea.
Molly, what are your thoughts?
I think that somebody already brought it up, but I think it should also reflect the neighborhood itself too, because I think that's also important.
In past instances, have kids been polled, or are we worried about ending up with school?
Bodie
McBoatface?
We'll get it into, yes. It's that, British research vehicle
Yeah.
named Bodie McBoatface.
Yeah.
The policy, what we'll get to next, does indicate kids should be included in the process.
Right.
To probably the appropriate extent possible.
So we as a board are bound by this policy. If we as a board all just said, hey, we just want to name, we want a new name for State Road, do we, like, does that have to go through this process, or is the board, how does that work? I'm trying to understand.
This policy here is an administrative policy, so we have indicated to ourselves when we rename something, this is the process we'll use. It's the board's discretion to name. So the board can use this process or not, or change this process as it sees fit. This is just kind of what's been on the books and how we have done things in the past, and happy to adjust that policy now. This is an administrative policy, it's not a board policy. It's kind of like how we do business, but it's not kind of ensconced in law, so to speak, the way a board policy would be.
Jim?
And for those of you that maybe aren't aware of this, but in the past, in the years that I've been here, we started naming schools after a position where they were in the community, Northside Elementary School, then Southern Bluffs, then we got away from that and we started, or maybe back and forth, but naming schools after some individual that was prominent at the time and people wanted to recognize. So those were the two criteria that were in the past. What goes forward, I have no idea.
Yeah, that's something I was kind of curious about too, since we're losing Hinch and Spence and Hogan. I know Hinch is also named after someone. Is Spence named after someone else? Like, are we losing a part of our history that perhaps we could enshrine with naming a new school? I mean, this is a process for the community here, but that's just something like I kind of thought of consideration.
Can you tell us what was the process for the Northside Elementary? Because that seemed clean and.
I wasn't, yeah. Do you remember, Joe, how the process went?
It seemed like easy, and this seems
Yeah.
like getting complicated. That's the reason I ask.
We followed this process, so the school came up with 3 names and they brought it back to the board. And I remember the students and the staff coming and presenting it to you as on the board and what their recommendation was, and then the board voted on that.
Seemed sweet and easy.
Yeah.
So if we followed the
What if they come up
process,
with 3 just terrible names?
Like, I don't know that even.
then you would reject them.
They're like, nope.
No, we're not doing that.
Nice try.
Here's my thought. I'll just throw my thought about Hogan. I'm a history guy, and the Hogan family donated that land a long time ago. And keeping it Hogan Elementary School, to me, would be the appropriate thing to do. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know if there's Hogan, family around, or ancestry part of it. But I don't know. Hogan Elementary is easy.
It's also not been an active school long
Correct.
enough that
Yeah,
it's kind of
it's-
new again.
Correct.
I hadn't thought about that.
I agree. I feel like that neighborhood is just identified as the Hogan neighborhood, and so keeping that name seems to make sense. I also agree with your comment about renaming State Road. I have talked to some people that have gone to State Road a long time ago who did not agree with that. But I reflect on the comments that we got from the linkages after Lincoln Middle School was closed. And again, it was closed in January, February, and the kids started in August or September, whenever. I mean, it was a very short turnaround. So this is Monday morning quarterbacking, but it was those kids coming to our school. And we don't want that to happen. And so I think keeping the name State Road contributes to that, and renaming it something. So now it's Hinchin and State Road's new school, I think, is fair and brings the community together. Just my thoughts that I had.
Fair
I think we
assessment.
might get a little pushback on that, because it's just been known as that, but I think that there's some other good names. Dr. Engel one day told me Pamel Creek School, and I kind of like that one, but anyhow, that's just my thought. Were you gonna say something, Jim? I'm sorry.
Well, the only person that I hear in the community, and I have a number of colleagues behind me, that would like to name Hogan Elementary School, whatever we call that, they would like to name it after Dick Schwantz, a former superintendent and city council president. I mean, in my lifetime, if there's a person out there that you look up to and say, hey, did this person make a significant difference to education and the city of La Crosse, it would be him.
And I've also received some feedback as well. on that.
So my recommendation would be to use this process. So we would involve the people, we would have a committee, there would be a person assigned, they would bring a series of recommended names to me, and I would bring them to the school board, and the school board would make the ultimate decision, and could be on that list or not on that list. But it would be a way to ensure that there was a level of involvement in the community, people had an opportunity to submit recommendations and suggestions, there was a screening process, eliminates the administrative burden for the school board, and you can feel like there was a reasonable amount of community engagement to make a decision that could last 100, 150 years.
Do we as a board need to direct the administration to do this process for State Road? Because it already has a name. And I want to make sure that we are clear and intentional in that process.
Is there a lot of cost in changing the name? I mean, obviously, the high school is a lot different, because you have gymnasiums that have logos and everything. Is State Road, I don't remember it, like, to me, it's not,
Letterhead and stuff.
probably, it's not.
Couple $1,000 maybe for some exterior and internal signage.
Letterhead has to get updated regularly
Yeah.
anyway.
I don't like changing State Road. That's like my neighborhood that I grew up in. So like I grew up in State Road neighborhood, like the Hogan neighborhood is,
I wasn't a fan of Riverhawks, but I'm one now.
yeah.
That's some of the feedback I got from people in that neighborhood as well.
That's such a generic name, I don't know.
I just,
Historically, it was on Highway 33, the state road,
Yeah.
out by the Ora Trail Farm as a one-room schoolhouse. It was moved up the road a little bit closer to La Crosse, probably a quarter mile. And then when it was reconstructed in the, what would it have been, the 50s, 40s?
50s.
50s,
I can
it
tell you
was moved to
exactly.
that new location. So, go ahead.
Well, we talked about Hogan, but how about Josephine Hinchin? Is there any Hinchin around this family? I have no idea.
From the start, because I was a Hinchin kid, and thinking about exactly, like the way you phrased it, Dr. Engel, around bringing two groups of kids together, from the start, I've been talking about the importance of what this transition is gonna look like, and I think the name is a big part of that in creating the sense of belonging. I wouldn't have known that State Road had a lot of, investment in the same way that maybe the Hogan neighborhood did. But, it's different, for me from that perspective, because I'm losing that school. So,
And certainly, any recommendation we bring can make sure to include the existing names for those sites on that list, and so that the board would, of course, have an option to consider that. If part of this committee's process would be to provide rationale for the recommendations for each of the names that are on a short list that's brought to the school board. And I could also imagine it not being a single name, but a range of options, maybe rank ordered by the committee. And so the board would have discretion without, trampling over the intent of the group to pick from a range of names. We could create a engaging process for the community that has some discretion and some community involvement, but also leaves opportunity for the board as elected officials to make the decision that you all think's best.
what is that process to engage the community? What would that look like?
At a
Like
minimum,
bringing people in, like meetings, or how do we engage the community?
so the indication in the policies, the committee will include representation from staff, parent-teacher organization members, and neighborhood community members. Committee may include student members. If not, they must solicit input from students. So that's the minimum level necessary. I could imagine having a survey out there or soliciting input, you know, like, hey, what names do you recommend? And then having
Naming
this
competition.
smaller group speak on it. I'm sure, depending on how the process goes, there's always public comment if people want to weigh in. We could create a special opportunity to speak to the committee to gather all that up, as opposed to a formal school board meeting as well. We could have it posted on the website for comment for a period of time in this process. Hey, here's our 4 finalists. We're gonna whittle it down to 3. You know, what are your thoughts? You know, that could be something to generate interest and opportunity for feedback. Could look at a lot of different ways. I would turn it over to this committee to identify the best way to engage the community.
And of course, that process really is separate from us. You can just do that, and we can also do something else.
Totally, yep.
But I would like to hear from the community in terms of what their
Oh, for
thoughts
sure.
are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
I mean, that'd be a good starting point, I think, for us.
So my recommendation on timeline would be to start in January by appointing a committee chair to develop a committee, start working through the process. I anticipate it could be accomplished in 3 to 4 months, January through March, April timeframe. Hopefully this board, as seated currently, would have the opportunity to make that decision. It's tough when it transitions between boards, because then there's a learning process and a reacquaintance with the whole thing, you know. So wrapping up by April would be the goal, with the target of maybe the second meeting in March.
So when you talk about neighborhood community members, so for the Hogan site, you would include neighborhood members from the Hogan site, the Spence site, and the Emerson site?
All the neighborhoods impacted by the proposed boundary areas, we would reach out to those neighborhood associations and include voice in that way. Yeah, and that would be Grandview, Emerson, Hogan, Wygant, and the Trinity Longfellow neighborhoods. I
And
don't
they
know.
became named
Bluffside.
because of the schools, right? What's the chicken and the egg there?
Yeah.
It's the school,
Yeah, so-
and then the neighborhood.
This is a big,
a
bigger
big deal.
decision than you maybe think about.
Well, I've thought about it.
So we're not gonna end up with the Aaron Engel Center for kids who can't read good?
Nope, it says, unless something happens, you have to be deceased or no longer employed, and I hope to be neither, so.
Any further discussion on the naming? Do you
I
have
would
the
just,
direction of the naming from us?
I do, thank you. That's very helpful.
Oh, I think Jeff was saying something.
Oh,
here.
Oh.
Jeff, please go ahead.
from, 2 things. One, doesn't sound like you can hear me super well, so, make sure, you just talked about having the neighborhood associations being involved in some of that conversation. You know, based on your initial criteria of having the entire community be brought into it, you might want to make sure that that happens in some sort of way, whether that's just general polling. But I could also see this is a really good opportunity to have positive news and then positive activities with us in the news. Similar to the way Oktoberfest kind of names or brings their theme every year or selects their button, right? Like you could find creative ways to bring the community as a whole, bring our students, bring our teachers from the buildings, you know. So whoever leads that committee, I just want to make sure that we're, one, making sure we're hearing from the broader community, not just the neighborhoods that are going to be impacted if we want to bring the entire community together. And 2, make sure that we're bringing in creative and fun ways and we don't miss the opportunity to have fun with this. And don't just go through the process just to get it done. So those are my only 2 recommendations.
Thank you, Jeff. I took those notes down. I appreciate that. All right, the next item I have is school boundaries. In the referendum process, of course, identifying what the likely school boundaries might be was present in that process. However, to formally change boundaries, it requires school board action. And so the next step would be to just reacquaint ourselves with those boundaries and then go through a process to formally approve them. So when I think about goals there, we want to make sure we meet our capacity requirements. Can't have more kids than we can fit in there by fire code or reasonable practice. We want minimal disruption to students. That was one of the goals of this referendum, bringing our communities together in whole as much as possible. And then ideally balancing enrollment to the greatest extent possible so that we have representative buildings. Adam?
I remember when we originally were going through the referendum, that part of the things we had was a separate committee. I forget what it was called, again, it's my memories fogs up this late night, but.
Tim, what was the name of the
Did
committee?
we?
I'm teasing you.
Oh, the facility.
Yeah, that one. Did we have
Try to
some kind
forget
of
about that.
work done with this already in advance that we can look upon?
The work is pretty much done, you know, in terms of like the work. And thank you to Tim Alberts for his work on the Facility Advisory Committee. I believe that got to us where we
That's
are
why
today.
it's-
Without that, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
So I don't think the process will take very long, but I just want to, my suggestion is to follow the policy again, to kind of go back through all of the rationale and justification and analysis, provide it to the school board for approval at the end of that. I just wanted to make sure, you know, if there's any other thoughts, goals, et cetera, that we have in that process in the process that you want
I'm
to.
sorry to steal your thunder.
Oh, it's quite all right.
I thought when we approved the referendum, we had talked about moving kids, what kids were moving and what bound,
Mhm.
like, I thought that's already been decided. Now it's reopened, I'm confused what we're doing here.
We didn't approve boundary changes, that we got proposed for the different plans that we were considering. We saw, you know, a prospectus of what the boundaries could look like. And if memory serves, part of the reason that we went with the plan that we did is it really regularized the boundaries. It got rid of some of the busing islands and things, and that was really
Right.
significant. But we didn't like
Yeah, we didn't
formally
officially approve it, but
Yeah.
Right.
I'm just like, what would we tweak from that? That's, I mean, because those were like,
I think we probably have a conservative approach here. So I remember this was a big
Maybe
deal
nothing.
with communities during the referendum, and what, if they would vote for the referendum or not was about these boundaries. So I think it's best probably to stay in between that, what we already had devised.
There's folks in our community, in our schools, who want to know for sure what the boundaries are, and
Mhm.
the school board has not formally approved the boundaries. And
Right.
So, for me,
right,
More of a
right.
procedural
So
thing
is
here.
this just a formality then?
it could be a formality, but there could be questions, right? Then people have had questions, like, you know, there's one portion of the Hinchin neighborhood that is headed to Hamilton, and there's portions of Emerson that are headed to Hamilton. And so it's worthwhile for something as big as this to just reacquaint ourselves with what the final product looked back in January of 2024, and just reiterate the commitment to that or any tweaking based on any new understandings. Enrollment boundaries are as good as the next year, right? Like, they can change every year. And so the idea behind this is simply, my proposal is simply just to like affirm it formally. And it could be as simple as the board saying like, no, we just want to affirm those boundaries and we're done. Wash hands, move on. But I am proposing to just reacquaint the board with it all, with all the information, so that in the light of day, you can say, yes, this is what we want. Anyone who has a concern has an opportunity to address those, so that we're open and honest about what's going on.
Okay, I see your intentions. I just want to make sure we're not opening a big can of worms left from the referendum again.
I don't anticipate recommending anything different, but I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I feel like we haven't officially acted on it, but it was an inherent part of the referendum, so I'd want to be transparent with that. But I will still say I really dislike the idea of sending more poor kids to Hamilton. I just struggle with that. Yep.
And I would agree with that. I mean, there was a really good purpose, and that was, again, Dick Schwanz's whole thing. He was writing about it in books. He quoted across the United States in terms of what we're doing is we're putting many minority and/or poverty kids in one area and all the affluent kids over here. When do they ever mix? If we really want a good mix, then we need to somehow bring them together. And if all you have in a poverty school is, I'll use the example that is used on occasion, a bunch of slow runners in track, they think the fastest one in the group, I'm great, I'm the fastest one in this group, I don't even see the rest of the world. But if we integrate them, then we have some aspirations that we can say, hey, listen, we're all in this, and that was the purpose of those islands, is to integrate society. I spent a lot of time, when I say a lot of time, 6 years at Hamilton, and let me tell you, there's a lot of poverty in that group, and whether that should continue or not, I'm not here to argue that point. I just validate the purpose of those islands.
I think that's a good point. I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I think it's interesting and important to reflect on the different levers that have been pulled over the decades to try to equalize things, right? We changed the whole school funding model as an equalization effort. We went with open enrollment as a school equalization effort, and some of those things now sit in tension, right? So open enrollment sits in tension with the deep desire that people express for neighborhood schools, right? And so, yeah, we're kind of caught in a difficult spot navigating all of those different initiatives over the years to try to figure out what to do, so, yeah.
Yeah, and I can certainly, as a part of this, talk about the history of socioeconomic balance in the school district and how it has come and gone and come and gone, and what the ultimate impact has been. And we talked specifically about socioeconomic balance in January of '24 when we were talking about these various options. So it was like definitely top of mind for the school board, but there's folks who've been elected since then and others who might want to acquaint themselves with that whole outcome too.
My understanding was that the islands weren't having the redistributive balancing power any longer because of changes in demographics in those neighborhoods. Not to say that there aren't other issues of concentration and things happening, but the islands weren't fixing that, weren't addressing that any longer.
Yeah, within 2 years, the islands did a lot to rebalance our school district on a socioeconomic basis. And then 2 years later, charter schools and inter-district transfers were introduced for a variety of reasons. And the result has been a gradual degradation of the benefit of socioeconomic balance. The consolidation on the north side into a new elementary school eliminated all of the islands that sent kids north, leaving only 2 islands left, the State Road Island over by Hamilton and the Spence Island up on the bluff north of State Road. And those have a minimal balancing effect. And because of intra-district transfers and migration, kids attend all over the place. It's almost hardly aligned with those islands any longer.
Any other comments? Jeff, you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I know it was a big topic when we went through the referendum conversation, so just good for everybody to get acquainted with it to see if it's the final moves we want to make.
So my tentative timeline would be again in January, and present something, one of the meetings in January, probably final decision in February at some point. Should be pretty straightforward. I don't anticipate lots of conversation, but an opportunity to
Why
have a
would we
discussion.
wait till January? Could we do it sooner?
We could. I've generally found it nice to be able to get through the start of the school year with more positive things, and then after the new year, start tackling some of the
The work.
more challenging things. It has given new school board members 7-8 months to get their feet settled, understand policy, procedure, all the things. And so in my experience, tackling tough stuff after the new year has been an effective strategy. So that's why I recommend that. certainly do it sooner, though, if folks have an interest.
Just based on the conversation on the table, I don't know that it's gonna be a, what's the word I'm thinking? Controversial issue.
Yeah.
So-
I wonder if it would be possible just to get like some of the history over the next couple of meetings, or not necessarily a whole nother workshop, but maybe a quick information item on like, what were some of the conversations at the last redistricting? Like, I remember when I was in school, pushing the line to a ferry or high school line was a big conversation.
That's
So,
And that's, I think, your attachment to a particular place in town.
Right.
But the one among poverty and affluent is totally different. There are people that, when they were assigned to Hamilton, they fought tooth and nail. Matter of fact, the superintendent was almost recalled from the office. I mean, there were people picketing the office and everything else to get rid of Dick Schwantz because he proposed this solution. And it is heart in it for the right reason, and almost lost his job because of it. And, you know, I could bring in all kinds of different comments, but I'm sure you're aware of it. It is a totally different world between certain schools.
Yeah, these sorts of conversations can bring up lots of emotion and political activity, and lots of reasons why after in January is a better time politically to be focused on these sorts of things as opposed to prior to January.
And people who may have not been part of the conversations before will be interested in this conversation
it'd be real
now.
now.
Yeah,
Ooh, yeah.
so
Bless you.
I think maybe it'll all go smooth.
So I will start preparing some history background so that when we get to decision making, the board feels confident, and I can work closely with Ms. Sukla on what the board agendas look like. That sounds all right?
School property reuse.
School property reuse. So this is a ways out, but only about 20 months out, 18 months out. And so having some sort of process in place up front in order to address the Hinchin, Spence, and Emerson sites will be important. Once again, three things I'm thinking about are the goals with this process, the process itself, and then a potential timeline to get work done on it. My initial thoughts as far as goals are, number one, this is a big deal. Property is a big deal. And I want to make sure that whatever is discussed or is on the table is within the school board's intent. So it's within the parameters that the school board is interested in pursuing. You're the elected body of the school district. It's your property on behalf of the people to decide what to do with it. And so I want to make sure that whatever is considered is within the board's intent. The second one, goal for me would be to engage with the community. There's a lot of interest in property. It impacts property values, it impacts neighborhoods, city planning. So engaging with the community, I think, is important at some level. A goal of mine is to continue to be better about aligning with the city. That's been, when we're at our best, we do really good stuff together, and when we're not engaged with the city, it leads to dysfunction and missed opportunity. And so, to whatever extent we can, I would love for our project to align with the city, once again, within the board's intent. That's number one. And then lastly, if we do move on from the properties, to receive fair value for their worth. That's important as well.
Jim?
Yeah, I would agree 100%. Get the city involved with us and see what their intent would be or what their suggestions would be so that we consider the whole thing.
Well, their intention currently is we pay for their problems, so I'm not really excited about that.
I think we do better things together than we do separately.
If we have a city hall that works together, yes.
Other goals or hopeful, broad outcomes of this process?
I've been thinking about what's the balance between ensuring the financial return or minimizing the ongoing costs, because that was a big kind of whole part of the referendum question. And then finding opportunities for community use and getting continued value out of the buildings. And I'm not sure which of those, in my mind, should be the top priority at this point, but that would be fitting within, whatever we're gonna consider, I think is gonna have to balance those kinds of
And it's
options.
close to even between those two.
Well, maybe, I mean, maybe one of them is
Yeah.
much more important to us.
You
Maybe
don't-
we need to maximize the savings, or the sale, or whatever it is.
We
but-
don't know until all the facts are in front of
Exactly,
us.
yeah.
I mean, I have the history of disposing of the Jefferson and the Roosevelt buildings both, and in both cases, we just talked to the neighborhood, and what they wanted kind of ended up being what happened. I don't know if it was by design or just kind of the way the pieces fell together. Jefferson they'd like to keep a school, and they ended up with a school. And it's not a school now, but it's still a building that serves kids with special needs. And Roosevelt was really looking at housing, and that's what that became. And so I think those neighborhoods really know. We have several properties that we're looking at. I think the other thing that, and maybe that's intentioned in somewhere, is how do we align what we're doing with our future planning? I mean, I don't want to be looking to get the best value out of something when we really wish we would have saved it. So I think that that's an important piece. And I'll just throw out one other specific thought is, I received a lot of input, I think we all did, from Emerson. And I remember specifically talking to one parent who really kind of helped me understand, because I had some preconceived notions. But really the concern is, an apartment building, I'm not suggesting that that's going to happen, but how that would impact that neighborhood. I mean, and I think we need to be really thoughtful about, because it's such Hinchin is a neighborhood, but I suspect that it's so much property that's probably going to end up going to housing in some way, shape, or form if we don't retain it. I think there's some natural ones, but I think I'm really concerned about the Emerson property, because it's right by the university, and the neighbor, I want to be really super sensitive how that affects that neighborhood, because it's so close to that neighborhood. I think, I live just a few blocks from Hinchin, and I kind of am not too worried about what's going to happen there, but I am very worried about what's going to happen at Emerson. So that's just my 2 cents worth.
Speaking of the history, Joe, were you involved in the sale of those properties at all?
Jefferson and, yes, both of them.
Do you remember the process, from the administrative side?
It was very similar to what we did at Lincoln, where we had community forums in the LMC and had people in and talked to the neighbors and the neighborhoods, and they gave us input into what they wanted into their.
The one we had for Jefferson was at the Northside Policing Center,
Yeah.
and people could just basically talk, and the room was packed, and they were, the big message was, we don't want a Hooters, I remember that. The Lincoln property was a more designed process, and kind of broke into groups, and there were facilitators, and it seemed, I attended both of those. I personally enjoyed the one for Jefferson better. I felt it was more grassroots. It was more what was on the people's mind versus a design process to get them to think certain thoughts. I don't want to use the word contrived for Lincoln, but it felt more that way than the process we did with Jefferson. But it was a little scary going in a room with a lot of unhappy people, I will just say that. Yeah.
So I just had a question, more procedural question, maybe I should have asked this before, from the 20-year-old asking here. We, as a school board, don't really have a say about the zoning of the buildings or the grounds we're selling. That's up for the city council, right?
That's a good question.
We have we can ask for certain zoning, right? So if it's a school, it becomes zoned governmental, public. Joe?
Yeah, there's public, semi-public, but we could actually be a school in several different, it depends how we want to ask that to be rezoned, but we could,
Okay.
there's several that will be allowed for school use, yes.
Since I feel as if it might be unfair for me to say this, is even though my knowledge is very unlimited, but I kind of remember, kind of alluding to your apartment comment there, remember about, we have a declining enrollment. We see that apartment complexes don't really produce that much future students for us in comparison to single-family homes. I mean, I don't think it's really our authority to say that it could be turned into single-family homes, or I also think that community might want something else to do with these kinds of buildings here, but I don't really think that's really a school board question more than it is a city kind of question there.
If we sell the properties, I think you're exactly right. Yeah, I mean, that it leaves our hands entirely, and in terms of building single-family housing, like, people just aren't doing it right now,
It's
right?
not
I
that
mean,
profitable in comparison to other
Yeah. and
larger conglomerates, especially
Thinking,
lacrosse.
thinking about the Hinchin property, the size of it, where it situates, and like how the roads lead up to it could very easily be developed into another part of the neighborhood, right? I know where there's 42 acres previously used for commercial property, sitting there with nothing being developed on it still. If it was gonna be turned into single-family houses, I feel like it probably would have started already, and those are huge projects. So, yeah, I mean, it's, we could talk about it, but I think you're right, it's not ultimately something we get to decide at that level. Oh, hi.
Yeah, okay, I'm glad I'm not the only one who thought that through. It's just something I thought of consideration of, we kind of have to sell these properties ourselves here, but
Well,
what kind of control do we have?
well, yeah, I mean, and as I recall, again, if memory serves, sale was not kind of immediately on people's minds, especially because of the flexibility I think you alluded to just now. If we're still looking at, beyond 2050, right? We still have old middle school buildings to think about.
Really?
And, yeah, go figure, right?
I wish somebody'd mentioned that.
If only Jim had been there to bring that up several times. So, yeah, I mean, I think we need to be careful about considering selling too quickly, absolutely. And a significant amount of input would have to inform that. But so, yeah, aligning with the district's needs and a really good long-term plan, I think, is the wiser option from my perspective.
Definitely agree.
That was my concern as well, letting go of property when we know how much trouble it was to find property that was
They ain't making it
located,
anymore.
it's just not here. So if we are thinking about middle school out in the future,
You talk about single-family homes, LaCrosse generally is not interested. You can only have so many so their decision, I serve on the Mayor's Neighborhood Revitalization for the last 15 years, and about 12, 13 years ago, they said, hey, listen, we can't expand out.
Right.
Individual housing is not gonna make it. We need to go up, and that's why you see all the apartment buildings going up, single-family dwellings. Holy cats, you go out to home, and every time you drive by, there's another 80-acre farm being sold to build houses.
And a lot of that's just because LaCrosse as a city is kind of in a valley.
Yep.
It has the bluffs or the rivers, you can't really expand so much.
In terms of process, I chatted with Brian Fukuda. He's a longtime resident of the school district, worked for the city, the county, the health system, Boys and Girls Club. He's with a firm that does planning now. And so he's somebody I serve on a couple committees with and appreciate his perspective. Sat down with him just to kind of understand, like, what are some of the things that you would want to go through in order to understand the best outcomes for these properties. It's a big deal. This is like forever sorts of decisions about property that probably won't be regained. The first thing that he and his associate suggested was a market analysis, like just finding out what the property's worth, what uses are, what the situation is, scan the field, kind of just understand what the needs are in areas so that the school board kind of walks into it eyes wide open. The second thing was a condition assessment. We already pretty much have that in working with our architects and our engineers, but just making sure we've refined that so we understand the condition of those buildings. Once again, that helps with market values and assessments and uses in the future. And then the third thing was key stakeholder engagement, starting with the board. So understanding what the board's parameters are before you start talking to anyone else. If the board is saying we're not selling this, well, then that limits the future uses pretty dramatically. Whereas if they say we're selling this one but not this one, now it opens up things to additional considerations. And then any other key stakeholders, city planning maybe, you know, key folks in the community who think about things on a larger scale. Community engagement following that, whether that's open houses or roundtables or surveys, it all kind of depends on what comes out of that key stakeholder engagement piece. And then developing a plan with options for each site. That was their recommendation. This is an area where we're not city planners, we're educational experts. And given the importance and gravity of these sorts of decisions, I would prefer to hire somebody who's an expert to help us work through the process. You know, these are $1 million sites, and if you compound that over 100, 150 years, it's, you know, billions of dollars of value that's essentially locked up in these places. So, in terms of timeline, once again, probably a year-long process if we were to engage in all of these pieces. The board's discretion, of course, with the sale of property. Probably starting in January, running through December, it would put us in a position next year to be having conversations the following January about what to do.
Do you have any sense of what a market analysis costs on multiple large properties?
My guess is that this whole process, I asked for a ballpark, you know, somewhere probably between $30,000 and $60,000 to do the whole thing, you know, and if there was follow-on requirements to help dispense of the property or, you know, all that other stuff, you know, there'd be additional costs.
Do you
Dan,
know?
just so
Oh,
you-
sorry.
Dan, just so you notice, it says low battery. Just want to make sure we don't lose Jeff.
Go ahead, Owen. As part of that, do you know, did you ask or was it offered whether any kind of environmental assessment would be part of that process?
We didn't discuss that. Certainly we could do so if we got to that point. That would almost be, it could be a part of it or it might be follow-on, you know, once there's some decisions made.
Yeah, I mean, I know at the point of any actual building or remodeling or changes or things, like an environmental impact assessment could be really valuable. I didn't know if there is such a thing as an environmental impact assessment that addresses like the what-if question for a whole section of a neighborhood or.
Yep, they would absolutely do that. So like when we were considering the train property, we had an environmental assessment done, you know,
For
prospectively.
water runoff and things like that, I imagine.
Yeah, for what we were anticipating doing, like, is it possible to do this thing here? So that would be once we have some more narrower options. If the board was saying, all right, we want to change this property into early childhood, and there's kids are going to be outside more frequently, you know, what would the environmental assessment say about the likelihood of that? It would probably be a very quick one. But if the board was saying, let's say we want to tear down Spence and we want to put in a soccer field and a baseball field, probably have to just kind of scan the area for what drainage would look like, parking, water retention, et cetera.
Did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I apologize. I may not be the most creative person here. If the school district were to retain the properties, what would be some options that we would be able to pursue with that rather than selling? Like what would go on the land or what would we do with it?
Probably like athletic fields or like, it's been mentioned a time or two that both of our middle schools are approaching 100 years old and something has to be done. And so possibly for that. So I think Dr. Garcia said what's been said many times around this table is finding big pieces of property for a school building in our city is a challenge. And so getting rid of it, we need to think long and hard before we say goodbye to some property in some ideal locations, which is my personal reason why I'm super excited about the Hogan site, because I always was worried the city was just gonna close that building and be done, and I'm like, that's just the perfect neighborhood to keep a school in, so I'm delighted with that. Jeff, do you have anything you want to add to this conversation? We haven't, I know it's hard for you to join in.
Yeah, thanks, Deb. No, I would just say that I would be very hesitant to get rid of property. I think there's a creative use for every one of those, and we have lots of needs as a district. So I think it'd be the fun part of, at least the part that I will find fun about this whole thing is brainstorming with you as a group, as well as the community, to try and come up with some great uses and figure out how to get the community behind some of those uses. Owen asked the question, you've said multiple things, right? Middle schools, athletic fields, performing arts centers, all the things that the district could use in various capacities. Some of those are going to require some selling and getting some community backing and finding maybe some private donors. But I think every one of those properties we have has use, from early childhood education all the way to some cool things like performing arts centers and athletic fields, as well as new schools. So hard pressed for me to vote to get rid of any of those properties. How about that? So just want to set that out early.
Thanks, Jeff.
I might just suggest contacting Jason Gilman. He was a previous city planner, and I think in my time, as far as the committee I serve on, I've gone through 4 city planners, and he is absolutely the most brilliant. I mean, his mindset is something else.
I believe he's managing the River Point
Yes,
project now,
yes.
yeah.
So where's the money for this? Like, would this come out of the referendum money, or is there money in, like, I know it's not a lot of money, but it could pay for a good part of a TA. So I want to make sure I understand where this comes from.
Yeah, while we are well into the budgeting process, we would reallocate some budget in order to make it work. It's something that happens every year. Needs come up mid-budget, as they all do, and then we make some adjustments elsewhere, lower something here, have something there.
So Patty shared with us the deficit situation we're already looking at. We're not just tacking 30,000 on more because it's.
Nope, it would fall
Okay.
within the budget that we're approving, and
Okay.
so we figure it out a lot. And so this would just be another element of that. This is not a significant expense given our total budget, but to Ms. Sukla's point, every dollar matters, and we want to be judicious with our investments. And, I could even see having a staged contract where we get through a certain point, and if the school board's intent is to retain all the property, well, that dramatically changes the process, right? And then that might look entirely different from there, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very glad it kind of changed my mind or kind of learned more about some of the things we could do with the property we learned. Another quick question I kind of had is, so the timeline is we're starting more so looking into this into January. If we were to develop any of the property anymore, would that mean, what would be the timeline for that here, since as Trevor said, we're taking on debt this year? Would we have to go into a referendum, let's say, like 5 years in the future, when we can look into some of these development here? Like, what's the big picture?
I mean, if we
with
had
development?
a specific, like, this building is gonna turn into X.
Yeah, like, let's say if the board were to decide we're gonna do this with this land right here, we make that decision with the community right there, what would the timeline of development look like
Well,
that? What would we be leaving to the
depends on
next
the
project?
Yeah, so, if we had a process, whatever that looks like, from January to December, to understand what the use of this property would be in the future. So that would put us at December of '26. Then let's say that we made a decision in January of '27. That would give us until September to start the preliminary execution of whatever that was. So if it involved the sale of a property for some reason, that would give us 7 months to figure out what that looks like. We would have to move out of a building and do all the other things, and that won't happen until September. And so it might be, 6 months after that, that a building or a property would go up for sale, if that was on the docket. If it's repurposing in some way, well, that would give us 7 months, 8 months to plan for what that repurposing looks like. It might not be ready on September 1st, but it might be 6 months from then or a year from then to repurpose that facility. If it's a building we don't see any use for anymore and we want to put athletic fields there, that would give us a year to demo it and start planning for the athletic fields, say. If it's remodeling and repurposing to some, daycare setting or something, then it would involve, 6-8 months of preparation for that, finding contractors, putting out bids so that on the first day possible, we would be renovating that and have it up and ready as soon as possible. And so by starting the community engagement, the board engagement work now, it puts us in a position to be as ready as possible the day the buildings aren't used in their current purpose, and make that next step moving forward. Could still be another year after that before something happens. And frankly, depending on the board's decision, might just sit vacant for 3 years. That's a possibility too. I mean, that happens sometimes.
Theory it could happen.
As long as you don't have another Kmart situation.
I mean, Lincoln is an example where we've had it sit vacant for 2 years now, right? It's like, we did the best we possibly could. We were as aggressive as we could in repurposing it, and things happen. Just like at Kmart, things happen. The market changes, financing changes, interest rates change, and, things happen.
Molly, I don't want to put you on the spot. Did you say childcare?
Yeah, it's childcare, not daycare.
Oh, sorry, I keep making that mistake. Thank you for the correction.
I thought you were thinking about it.
That's all.
I'm sorry.
My stepmom is in regulations. It's
Two
almost
different
a tick
things.
At this point.
The referendum for the new buildings as well as the north side, is that a 30-year payoff or a 20-year payoff?
The loan that we took out in last March, 20 years.
So the north side buildings will be
Will-
paid off around 3031, 3032?
2033.
That's only,
Just around the corner.
yeah. I mean, it is truly, like, as we think about, well, by
It
the
goes
time we
quick.
make decisions and we think about how we're gonna use buildings, it's an ideal time for us to think about a referendum for what our next plan, I know that goes
Yeah.
into our next piece of long-range planning, but I just wanted to get that in my head.
Some of the timing for the failed referendum was around that we were going to cycle off debt, so the impact to taxpayers would have been really low. It would have felt really low because it wouldn't have changed their rate. But thinking about putting things forward when debt cycles off, I think is a smart thing to do.
Yeah.
If-
Because, yeah.
Especially with.
Yeah, both our middle schools were built in
9.7
1939, so.
If we were to have if we had a goal that our buildings were less than 100 years old, it would require a referendum every 6.5 years. If we were looking at
Sheesh.
150 years old, which is, things just don't hold up that long.
But if you
You'd be
do
talking
two
every 10
schools,
years.
if you do 2 schools and one referendum, then it's only every 12 or 13.
It's very true, very true. On average, so I think that, I've been thinking about that in a school district our size. It puts things in perspective. Like, it's not like we're gonna do this once and we're good forever. It's really that's what, hopefully, when we get to long-range facility planning, we start talking about, like, this is an ongoing, persistent need that we will always have until the state changes how building construction is funded. Those will always be local assets that will always require a referendum, and so there will always be a need to go to referendum to improve facilities. Just
Until the inevitable heat death of the planet.
exactly. In terms of process, pursuing things there, we have a little bit of time. I anticipated kicking things off in January. I can seek some ranges of costs if we want to engage with a third party, and some options maybe in there for what elements to approach.
Can I ask just, so in the meantime, while we're looking for the longer range solutions on each of the affected properties, I think the last thing anybody wants in the community is just a bunch of vacant buildings
Mhm.
sitting
Yeah.
there. So like we did with Lincoln, I imagine, we'll be like actively putting it to community use, opening it up for as much as possible
Totally.
while maintaining as low
There's
overhead.
always a need for gym space. Our cafeterias can be used as, community centers, voting, any number of ways we can use our
Okay.
existing buildings. Even if they're lightly used, they can still be maintained and made valuable to the community, certainly.
Daycare centers.
Ready to move on to
Childcare
long range?
centers.
Ready to move on to long range?
All right, thank you all. I'll bring back more in an upcoming meeting. All right, and then lastly is long-range facility planning. There's a document that was put together in January 24, Long-Range Facility Plan 2050. If you read through it, you'll see we've already done a lot of things in here, simply by virtue of the referendum and some other decisions that we've made along the way, and so that's awesome. We've already moved forward on that. Some of the goals I've thought about in long-range facility planning are facilities that facilitate learning, welcoming environment for kids and staff. We want to be the school district of choice. We want people to choose our buildings, reflective of future needs. A long-range facility plan should be, and adaptable for the future. I've been thinking again about process here for this. The first thing that I'm looking for, just to make sure it's updated as we take this next iteration of long-range facility planning, is an assessment of our current building conditions. I know Joe has been working on that with Bray for a while now, kind of like a grading system of various systems. And so that might be helpful for the board to have. We have this impression that, Logan and Longfellow are old and need to be top of the list, but an empirical assessment might show something different, or it might confirm our priors and will help us make that decision even more firmly. Identifying needs, what does that current assessment look like compared to our goals? So if we have goals for, like the best middle schools, but our assessment says they're the worst, then that would, identify a need there. Developing a range of solutions, and then evaluating and testing those solutions with the board and the community. So once we know what we want, then we can develop solutions and then figure out if they meet the board's needs or the community's needs if it requires referenda. And so interested in board goals and process that you want to see with this, and then certainly we can get into the weeds about what to do as well. For me personally, I want guidance so that we can tackle this problem in a thoughtful way.
Is there anybody that and it should be around the state, around the nation or something, that there's 3 districts that are very innovative as far as this whole process? They're going through the same things we're going through. But what direction do they go into, for what reason? I just feel like sometimes we try to invent the world right here in La Crosse instead of saying, hey, listen, they really have a good idea in wherever. Bring in some expert things. Again, I'm going to brag up the guy, Jason Gilman. He was always so good at that. As soon as we thought we're going in this direction, he'd say, yeah, but if you look at Austin, Texas, or Phoenix, Arizona, and then he'd say, this is what they're doing, or why is Minneapolis, Minnesota, one of the fastest growing cities in the U.S.? Why is that? Well, one of the things is they put in all kinds of public transit. And when they put in public transit, they made sure it was always going by high rises. And if you build a high rise in Minneapolis, you now have to have it on a public transit type thing. Now, those are all excellent, but we in La Crosse, I don't think around the table I said, wouldn't have thought of that. So you bring in somebody that, hey, I've studied 86 cities, and Minneapolis has got the cat's meow.
Yeah, certainly, once again, planning experts, certainly an opportunity to learn more from those who do it regularly.
I just have to say I've been appreciating the conversation here this evening. We're just kind of throwing out ideas. I'll just say, and I've already told this to Dr. Engel, if we can get every building to be my age or newer, I'll just retire from the board. You can just be done with me if we could just achieve that somehow. So if you want to get rid of me, that's a good way to do it. Something has to be done about the middle schools, and I think looking at the, these are just my thoughts, and we can just go around the table, but there were a lot of things we didn't love about the Facility Advisory Committee, but one of the things that was discussed there at one of the sessions was about the specialized areas in middle schools and high schools,
Labs?
the labs, and I'm gonna use.
Theater.
Industrial arts, there's a new language for that.
Career tech ed.
Music areas, there's very specialized areas in our schools that need updating. And as I think about it, so we've got 2 high schools and 2 middle schools. How can we address our needs for our middle schools, update those specialized areas so that we can be competitive in our high schools? And could we share those spaces with the middle schools in some way to, instead of building 4 of those, we'd only have to build or update 2 of those? That's just a thought that keeps going back in my mind. The other thought that I have is, and again, this is maybe going back to the last area that we had talking about the property reuse, is as our downtown changes, I worry about our poly kids being in that building, and is one of the buildings that's going offline a better place for them? Is something I think about long range as I think about our facilities. So those are just some thoughts off the top of my head. And
Poly's also got limited capacity.
Right.
If you have room for growth.
If you said, Deb, what would you do? I would put them in Emerson. And I'd probably move administration there too, so they could be halfway between the north side and the south side. Again, I don't know if there's capacity in that building. That's just thoughts that I have off the top of my head. I don't know if Joe's face doesn't look like he likes that idea, but that's just some thoughts that I have. And, putting the poly kids next to university isn't a bad idea.
Could be a lot of
But those
synergies,
are
yeah.
just some thoughts that I just have of things. Again, I'm no expert in any of these. These are just some generalized thoughts. And I don't know what else anybody has to add about long-range planning. And, I'll also go back. We can look at Phoenix and Minneapolis and all these other areas. But at the end of the day, we are a very unique community. We've got, as was mentioned earlier, the river and the bluff. We're a long, skinny community. And so what works in some of these other communities doesn't always work for us here because we're just geographically different.
But
And
you can take an idea.
yes, you can take, yes, there's nothing wrong with that, but, so,
and make it fit.
other thoughts? Long range? Yeah, go ahead.
One thing I think is worth kind of coming back to mind now that Jim had raised long ago during the referendum question was the possibility of reconfiguring the grades. And it's something that might be, if not necessitated, strongly recommended by the changes in our demographics. And if we are considering, having a junior and senior high combined, a 7 through 12 or a 6 through 12, there are different ways that it's been done. That kind of planning takes, I think, a significant amount of forethought,
Yep.
but should be part of the conversation.
Thank you.
I'm trying to look about this of, mind you, I've kind of this naturally predisposed in my mind that we'd be focusing on the middle schools next, while also maintaining that we're keeping our long-term, I'm gonna say temperance, long-term balance of make sure we're keeping up with our old buildings while also kind of innovating the buildings that we do have here. Not only are we looking again at like the hybrid middle school, high school, which a lot of school districts in our area have as well, but I'm also trying to think of extra I had a thought and it just kind of evaporated from my mind because I'm realizing it's not working, but.
Wait until you get old.
No, it's interesting to look around at like surrounding districts and things, but I think
Right.
to Jim's point too, like we're also significantly different than a lot of
Exactly
our
what I was
neighbors
thinking
within
of.
our CSAT, like like has been said, there's a reason construction is happening in Holmen and all these places because they have different sets of affordances and constraints than we're working under. And so I'm all for taking ideas, but yeah, needing to be
Right. In terms of like long-term facilities, we can only really maintain what we have. We can't expand like their districts
Right.
as well.
right.
So what exactly can we be innovative with the land that we do have? And a large think about that, like I think about like not right away, might make sure we're kind of being fiscally responsible to our taxpayers too, but what if we do want to have those middle schools or change one of them into a performing arts center?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
One of the things that I came to my mind is we have all these high school teams and show choirs and whatnot that are combining. And they're always like, oh, where are we gonna go? What if we transformed one of those schools into a place, a gathering place for those activities that are combined between the schools?
I definitely think that lacrosse is short of athletic facilities, activity centers. Where kids can go and get involved in any number of different activities. You go to some communities and you walk into it and you say, holy cats, what do you do here? Well, there's basketball down there, there's a music lesson going here. I mean, it's unbelievable all the options they have, and so I don't think we should rule those things out. We're short of athletic activity fields, indoors, outdoors.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to talk about. I actually just came from an orchestra concert. Apologies for being late. But a lot of, when you talk about why other school districts are so popular and why people are moving, I think a lot of it is the facilities and what they have access to. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've talked about how jealous I am of Holman's weight room or their performing. Oh, it's so nice. Oh, as a power lifter, I could never get enough of it. Or their performing arts center. And you sit there and you look at, yes, the resources, but also the quality, right? Because most students, I say most, aren't just going to settle for the bare minimum. They're going to want to do something, whether that be sports or music, or they want to like specialize in interest, whether that be with like the physical arts or something like that. Like there's so many options. And I think if we wanted to remain competitive, kind of opening that up and giving us access to more space to work on things like that. I like the athletic facilities because I've seen it before, where a very strong, like talented student athlete is kind of urged by people around him to go to like a private school because you're more likely to be noticed there just because either teams don't perform well or you just don't associate our district with strong success, and same for performing arts. There's a reason that people are leaving, and I don't think it's just space.
Go ahead, Jim.
Well, the other option, I think, is I don't know if any of the buildings we have would work out that way, but I also, and somebody in the area can help me out there, but daycare centers,
Childcare.
childcare. Whatchamacallit,
You've done
Quick
your
Trip just
job.
opened that building up. And I went through it one time and I was impressed. I know I've seen other ones, but I think lacrosse could use something along those lines.
I worry about that though too, because there's a big problem with childcare and there not being enough of it, which is also confusing given that there's fewer babies. But I wonder if the lack of a facility is what's keeping new groups from starting childcare
It's the
facilities.
lack
And
of, it's the business model.
it's the viability of the business model. They can't pay people enough. And that dovetails with what my thinking around different kinds of performing arts facilities. I mean, Jeff had that idea a couple of years ago, and I think stated it very, very well at the board table, around the kinds of needs that we might have. I would hope that they would be engines for new revenues, new jobs, drawing people into the area to do the kind of thing, not just having big open room with a track in it, but having facilitated activities and things that requires expertise. We have at UW La Crosse, we have a whole cohort of graduates coming out who specialize in outdoor recreation, tourism, and event management. It's a great
Yes.
program. Sport management, there are
Adaptive PE.
Adaptive PE is a great program. So I would think at best, those could be really worthwhile developments. Performing arts, right up there with the athletic kind of ideas.
So I think one of the, and I just glanced through here, and I don't know, but as I look at the long-range plan that we have, it's very clear the message here, and I'm not reading it in here, is we want to be competitive for enrollments. We want our facilities to help us have that competitive edge. I think that's a piece that's not in here. Jeff, again, do you have anything you'd like to add? I know it's hard again to jump in.
It is. Thanks, Deb, for including me. Appreciate it. No, I mean, I'm supportive of everything. I think single sites with our weird geographic layout to maintain two schools for geographic purposes, you know, the conversation of having a high school and middle school combined on the same site, there's some challenges there, right? I support it. There's some challenges there. We'd have to move some athletic facilities. We'd have to kind of figure out what those plans would look like. But to get to that point, right, there's a lot of back work that we have to do if that's something we want to pursue. And even if it isn't, I think there's still a lot of back work we need to do around building consensus on who we are and looking for opportunities to continue to integrate our high schools, our middle schools, and their activities, whether that's sports, performing arts, clubs, CTE, any of those things where we're really focused on becoming one as much as we can. And there's competitive things that go into it. It's less of a funding conversation for me. It's more of a community building conversation. So this isn't me saying we should go talk about those contentious thing and like combine football teams tomorrow. But there's opportunities, like we heard from our show choirs. I watch my kids in sports. I watch them at activities. We are not competitive. I watch our bands walk in parades. We don't look like we are one big district like we truly are in the spaces that we should be. So I've been encouraging Dr. Engel to think about this. I'm encouraging you all as board members to think about where are there low-hanging fruits on ways that we can provide a really good experience for our students, while also making us more competitive on whatever that is, whether it's robotics or orchestra or cross country, doesn't really matter. So I think that really will help us with the long-term facility planning to say, okay, we have one soccer team. How do we get a really good facility for them, and how do we get them to that facility, right? Where does that sit? So I think that's where my head starting is what do we need and where are those opportunities? Because we heard a lot of great opportunities that happened organically from our students and our staff over the last 6 months to a year. So I just want to make sure that we're kind of thinking about that, because I think it could really play into what we truly need and where we might put some of these things within the footprints that we have. So thank you.
We've had a lot of conversation this end of the table. Meredith or Jeff, or Tim, sorry, or Molly, do you have more you want to add?
I've already talked quite a bit today.
You have for you.
I mean, I agree with all of it. I mean, it's finding the few things. I mean, we talk about a lot of things, but it's focusing on the next couple things.
I do like Jeff's point about we really need to be one. I like that a lot. I remember when I moved back here from Portland, I was really excited to see the marching bands because I was in marching band, right? And I was kind of disappointed at what I saw. And then, other schools went by. I was like, they look put together. They look,
I mean, a lot of that has to do with numbers. I mean,
It does, but
it has to, a huge
You gotta
part
have
of
a
it. I
deep
mean, it
bench.
used to be, both schools back when you talk about that weight room, I would love to have that weight room. I'll show you the closet that we were in with the double the amount of kids. But yeah, to your point, I mean, I just think it's kids. I mean, it's why we have co-op teams and we have all that stuff now, but
because we do have a big district,
Yeah.
it's just kind of
yeah.
separate.
And obviously, the community made its decision when they didn't want one school. I mean, so we have to kind of deal with that part of it, and try to figure out the best ways of focusing on the things that we do need. But
And I like the idea of more cooperative or collaborative spaces, but it does introduce challenges about moving students, and scheduling. It causes problems with scheduling. Like, I love the Lacrosse Community Theater program here, and the way that it interacts with our schools, I think, adds a lot of value. But then, and William is involved in Lacrosse Community Theater and has been involved in high school productions that they've done over the summer programs. But then he's like, there's not a theater teacher at either of the high schools,
Yeah.
Yes. It's true with many of the activities
across the board.
Yeah,
isn't it?
I competed in theater in high school all 4 years. I went to a high school of 600 people. And, you know, we were competitive with our district, and that was a real place of belonging, right? To do that, to hang out in that space with that theater, and we just don't have that here. What we have is great, but it's not that.
You know, growing up in this city, I mean, it's always been a division. I mean, regardless of how you saw it, it's always north side and south side. And I don't know how you conquer that. I mean, you see it at graduations. It's very different, but we're in the same district and we're less than 10 miles away from each other. That is, if it was anything, that'd be the large focus, is to try to bring both schools together a little bit more. I don't know, it's just always been that way, and I don't know how you change that.
I don't think the crosstown rivalry is, in essence, a bad thing.
No,
I think
but-
it can come out in toxic ways.
Correct.
But I wonder if there are ways to harness it more as a productive force, right? To keep us working together, supporting one another, but like enjoying the opportunity to like show off and run. I have long thought that the marching bands should have some kind of special band off during Oktoberfest.
Or march together, or like, that would even be.
Yeah, something like it.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, I'm done.
You know,
Jim's been trying to say something, and I'll go to Owen.
Well, as far as going back to the dark ages, it is so much better. Before New Logan was built, I mean, then there was such a discrepancy between north side and south side. I mean, whether you talk about the books you use, or the desks you sit in, or the walls you look at, it was so totally different. And when Logan High School got their new school, it was really a big change in the student population. They had pride in that school and so on. You talk to any of the building principals that I was aware of, they said you just couldn't believe the difference in the student population, because now they are proud of their building and so on. So there still is the animosity between north and south side, but you don't hear as much as a put down, at least I don't, put down, where kids used to really be put down, or you're a north sider. I moved to French Island, they said there's only one thing worse than north sider, and that's a French Islander.
I remember
I-
that.
I also think that we have successes of the schools coming together, and maybe we can learn from those successes and speak to the people that were involved in that.
I'm just gonna throw this out there.
Acquire confluence.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I would love to see Central play their football games at Logan.
It's a great facility.
It would save on cost. You could, here's the biggest thing I hear, and I wish Scott was here, because him and I could banter back and forth, but, you know, all the facilities that are changing the football field, they have their own football field, they just got new stands, like the baseball fields, the softball fields, and Central, I hear it all the time, like, where's our stuff, right? Like, so you're continuing to create this like division of north side, south side, regardless if you're trying to or not, and you're trying to do the right thing, which it is the right thing. I'm not saying that's the wrong thing,
Yeah.
but it's gonna happen regardless, because somebody's always gonna be unhappy about not having the shiny new thing. But I would think that would bring a little bit of, you know, like, yes, it's your field, but it's our, you know, it's our district, it's our field too. I don't know. It's just something to throw out there.
How do you feel about that?
I mean, I would love to have Logan's Field. I mean, it's just such high quality. Like, yes, they're the very obvious logistical concerns of we can't both play on Friday. Actually, there are with the playoffs starting, which go us. With playoffs starting, we both Central and Aquinas both use UW's field. Well, we play Friday. Logan needs to continue practicing Friday so they can play their game Saturday. Where does that leave Aquinas? So there's like the logistical issue trying to get around that. But I would absolutely love to play on Logan's Field. Like it's just so nice. It's such high quality, and I hate to give them credit for anything. Not actually that bad. I promise.
There it is. There it is.
I'm saying that more to be dramatic. No, but like to all of your points, I think I enjoy having that rivalry. I think it can be something that's more playful. I think depending on what environment you're in, drastically changes it. Because if you talk to people in band, right, the competition between the two schools is, well, one of us is just better at what we do. If you talk to the football team, there's like, sometimes I swear there's genuine hatred. And it's actually quite scary. Like, I'll be sitting there and I'll be eavesdropping. I'm like, what? But that is what it is. That's also just kind of a part of the culture of each of the activities. But I will say, I have friends in show choir, and show choir had practice like directly before the concert tonight. And you had all of those kids crammed into our choir room because it's the only place that has like mirrors, trying to all do choreo, and these low risers, and it just like, our show choir used to be insanely competitive, and it's getting back to there now, but it was like one of the best in the state for a hot minute. Like, they're absolutely
For
incredible.
years and years and years.
Years and years. Like, it was almost unfair.
The Mike Esser era was phenomenal.
And then it kind of dropped off for one reason or another, and we're starting to pick back up now, but we're running into size constraint. Like, you can only fit so many people on our stage, and it can't be held at Logan because I don't have one.
Yeah.
So it has to be held here. So I think if we want to bridge that gap, I think a good place to start is through joint competition, not sports right away necessarily, but like, it's also a budgetary thing because DECA FBLA and DECA were talking last year about combining between the two schools just so we would have a little bit more money to stretch between, just because there's not enough to go around when you keep us separate. Or that either chapter, Central's DECA has grown significantly the last few years, and I give all the credit to them. But like, FBLA has like 5 or 6 kids at Central. And so it's almost a waste not to combine because you don't have the numbers to do a lot of the activities that come with it.
I would say something else I'm kind of hearing here and that I think about is that, like, a lot of these cooperative or collaborative things work because there's a faculty member or a staff member who's willing to drive and to spend hours and to coordinate with other people when they don't have the facilities, access to the facilities and the space at their thing. They fix it, right? They find the room with mirrors and, they do all that coordinating. And that works until it doesn't, right? And we saw that with like the French program. It collapsed. We had like a super awesome French teacher who got people excited and took them overseas and leveraged our sister city stuff, and people were so disappointed to hear that the French program was going away because they had such powerful memories of belonging and awesomeness to it. But the fact was that like that person wasn't there anymore. And that was a lot of work to be doing all the time to make it a program that was like that. And then the numbers dwindled. And then that's where we were.
Right.
That happens at other districts. So Dr. Engel and I created a super cool project up in Trumbull County when I was a human services director. And we shared a social worker, a school social worker, and then they also provided county-funded services with children's waiver, and they could meet those kids right in the school. It was such a cool thing, and it has literally collapsed since we've left because we aren't the ones carrying it on.
I love all these
Sorry.
ideas. I've taken notes on everything. And so for me, in helping guide the board through a process of evaluating all of this and updating our long-range facility plan, once again, I'll go back to the things I had identified. An assessment of our current buildings, just so that you have an idea of like where they're at, the HVAC, the exterior, the foundation, the core systems. Like, is it worth saving or not? That's gonna be helpful in any conversation. Identifying needs, I think we've done a lot of that here, but like refining that, honing it down, whittling it, and then looking at the difference between kind of where we want to be as a school district and what our facilities are providing, and then identifying the most important things to close the gap on. At that point, we can develop a range of solutions that the board can evaluate. If middle schools need to be improved, that rises to the top of the list. We can provide 3 or 4 different ways to tackle that. Could be build a brand new brand new middle school, tear it down. Could be a 7-12 at our existing sites at the high schools. It could be improve the buildings in place. And we can get cost estimates, impacts of all that, and kind of give the board ranges of things to look at. And you can choose the path you think will meet community's needs. And then evaluate and test those with the board and the community. You know, if it's gonna require a levy, probably a good idea to see what the community thinks about it.
The only thing we talked about activities, but there are a significant number of academic things that could be changed. There are many eighth graders right now that maybe are being taught algebra, but they are not being taught by a certified math person. They're certified by middle grade person. So they'd get so much more out of algebra if they were with, let's say, in a ninth grade class.
Yeah.
Algebra 1 here. And there's geometry being taught at Longfellow, and there were like 5 kids in the class. So the combination of classes would save money and benefit the students. So from an academic point of view, I mean, I'm sure it's true in science, other areas also, but I'm more familiar with math.
So if it's all right with the board, I'll work with Joe to get an assessment of our current facilities, and then we can start to hone in on key needs and goals for the district. Maybe, you know, like big picture stuff, where do we want to be? And then start to see where there's a gap between where we want to be and what our facilities can provide. And then that would tell us this is the most important thing.
Gap analysis would be
So-
really helpful.
Would the board want to think about, one of the things we've done in the past, again, we talked about facilities, because you need some concentrated time, is perhaps like a Saturday from 9 until 1, and then have some lunch or something. I remember going through this big, I probably still have that book at my house. It just gives us some concentrated time earlier in the day, and it was a relaxed conversation. We really got a lot done. I don't know if that's something, scheduling that with everybody's life, I get, is the biggest challenge, but is that something the board would want to consider?
Can I just make sure I understand? I'm open to the idea of it. I think for me personally, with my life and scheduling that, if I'm gonna commit that additional time, I feel like that needs to be really focused on a pretty specific question, right? And exploring, because this was really wide ranging.
Right. Oh,
And
yeah.
I can get behind this, right? But if we're gonna devote that much time, I would really want to have a clear kind of goal in mind, a set of parameters that we want to talk through, and at least some sense of what's gonna come of it.
And I'd like to have the notes for those things, the background material.
The homework, yeah.
Yeah,
right,
days in
yeah.
advance of that, so that you could definitely go through it, underline thing, pick out this, and
Yeah. That's why I think, for example, having the history on the past boundary changes over a couple of regular meetings, just in small bits, helps me be more ready to act.
Yeah, I mean, if we're gonna take a Saturday, we've gotta be very
Yeah.
clear what we need to get done. So I agree, that's a different conversation, the type of conversation we had this evening.
Yeah.
So I'll start laying the groundwork for maybe a retreat in the nearish future, near to short-term future. So we'll get information together so the board can start accruing subject matter expertise in this area, and then we'll kind of work together to find an appropriate time to make that happen.
That's good.
Thank you for your time. I think this is a great conversation. I think, I hope you got what you needed out of it.
Absolutely, this is fantastic.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
That was some of the most conversation we've had.
I agree. I thought it was great.
Thank you, Jeff. Have a great evening.
Thank you too.
Night, Jeff.
Owen, you came.